Live from... This is
the Just End the Suffering podcast.
For the win. Got it! Oh! He broke his ankle. Follow me. All ready for this?
Here's your host, Mike Phillips.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the latest episode of the Just End the Suffering podcast, featuring New York sports talk from a long-suffering fan. I'm your host, Mike Phillips. We are in week number 3 of the social distancing era of the podcast, recording from the mobile studio, but the show will still go on. We have some stuff to talk about. I am going to be doing a giant off-season episode today. We're going to take us from 2 different angles. First up, I will be joined by the Giants beat reporter for The Athletic, Dan Duggan. Dan and I will be talking about the Giant offseason, some of the big issues they had, some of the signings they've made, how they're doing in general. Then we're going to go to the fan perspective. We are resurrecting the fan forum, which hasn't been heard from a little bit on this podcast. I'm going to be joined by 2 Giant fans, Phil Fraietta, Justin Diaz. We will talk about how they're feeling about the team. We'll talk about how they're feeling about Dave Gettleman, Joe Judge, Daniel Jones, the signings, what they might do in the draft, all that good stuff. This week, we're also doing our pop culture hit as usual. We are going into the world of Westworld this week, season 3. We are going to be 3 episodes into the season. I'll be joined by our pop culture correspondent, Sam DeRosa, to break down Westworld so far, make some predictions of what's coming up. Also, get some tips from her on what she's keeping up with in the coronavirus stay-at-home era. But we'll start this week's opening tip, where I weigh in on some of the measures that MLB is considering to implement when they restart the season. It sounds like they have some plans. I have my thoughts right after this.
Baseball is looking at a lot of dates right now, but the target at the moment is in early June. The idea is that players would go back around mid-May for a second kind of spring training. That would be an abbreviated one, 2.5 weeks. And that because pitchers wouldn't be ramped up, they would expand the rosters and go back and play games. We don't know if it would be in front of empty stadiums. We don't know if fans would be there. They would love, though, to start the season in early June while recognizing that July ultimately may be the likelier and better time to begin the season.
All right, we are back with this week's opening tip. You guys heard ESPN's Jeff Passan describing the plans that baseball has to try and begin its season. And later last week, they put out an agreement between the owners and the players, some key issues being resolved for their plan to potentially come back from a coronavirus stoppage. So let's start here with the main points. Baseball won't start its season as of right now until there are no restrictions on mass gatherings that would limit the ability of teams to play without fans. That's the first point. On its surface, that does not sound good because obviously you're thinking, you know what, like the government just extended its guidelines for social distancing until April 30th. We're already getting there. Who knows when we're going to hit the peak of this virus and see it go down. You think it's going to probably calm down again before stuff goes out. But at this point, that is the initial plan. The commissioner has said, the Players Association echo this. There are still options to discuss neutral site games and games without fans. There can't be travel restrictions in the United States and Canada, which is, I think, the more important issue if you want to worry about starting a baseball season, because obviously right now there are travel restrictions in New York. The CDC has imposed a strong do not travel advisory for the tri-state area. Other areas start getting more of their own coronavirus issues. So you're thinking, you know what, like, at what point is domestic travel safe? And before that happens, there's not going to be any baseball. So that's a big issue, especially with Canada involved as well with the Blue Jays, because if this was just the domestic travel like the NFL, it would not be as major of an issue. But when you talk about now, you got 2 countries involved. You have the coronavirus dealing with 2 different issues. The U.S. and Canada currently have their borders closed for non-essential travel. That's an issue you got to work through. This one's obvious. Medical experts have to deem it safe for players, staff, and or fans to participate in baseball games. This is a kind of, well, duh. We are in a world where, you know what, they're not going to do things like open the movie theaters or open sporting events if it's not safe for the spread of the virus to continue. Until that happens, we're not getting baseball. This is the encouraging thing. Teams want to play as many games as possible, add some doubleheaders, extend the season in October with neutral site playoffs possibility. I think the calendar is open for baseball. I mean, you could play games in the Northeast probably through the end of October because the end of October is in the 50s. You could probably get away with that. Neutral site playoffs, I think, is possible for the World Series because if you're getting around Thanksgiving, you're only playing baseball in, let's say, Yankee Stadium if it's 45 degrees out during the day and 29 at night. You don't want that. Neutral site makes sense there. The schedule, as far as I'm aware, it's going to be very hard for them to redo an entire schedule just because teams have dates booked in terms of stadium availability. There's hotel considerations made. You can't just make the schedule from scratch right now and just start over. The general sense is that they would kind of pick up the schedule where the season starts. So if they're going to start the season on June 15th, June 15th's games would be opening day, for better or for worse. They could throw double headers on to like some game. Let's say you're playing a divisional opponent. Like, let's say you're playing the Mets are playing the Braves, and they're coming to Citi Field. They could play a double header on a Sunday or something to make up a game that they lost earlier in the year. You could also have the possibility of, pushing the regular season to October a couple of weeks and say, what, the rest of some of the games you're missing in April and May because, let's be real, they're not starting in May. The restrictions right now go up till April 30th. Even if everything is given the go-ahead by then, you still have to get these players into shape. The original timeline that Passan talked about at the beginning there about, mid-April, like not mid-April, mid-May, players get together, start having a camp, and then early June is the ideal scenario. The more likely option is that late May we're getting players into camps, mid-June, early July is when the season starts. They play July, August, September, October regular season and have expanded playoffs in November. There are also some financial ramifications of this deal if the side struck. The players' biggest concession here is get a full year of service time even if the season is canceled. Why is this important? Your players like your Mookie Bettses, your JT Realmuto, your Marcus Stroman, they're all becoming free agents even if we don't play a game this year. And this also moves along the players in the arbitration process. So like any of your second-year guys who become arbitration eligible for the first time get there without having to play a game if there is no season. That's a huge win for the players just because like that's something in the millions and millions of dollars being gained by these players. There's a transaction freeze right now. So as of this deal being done, teams can't sign players, make trades, or roster moves. So that's why you saw teams optioning players to AAA or AA over the weekend just to get within roster requirements. That means that, like, if you're a free agent out there right now, if you're Yasiel Puig, if you're Matt Harvey, you're not getting a contract right now until the freeze is lifted. Arbitration process is going to be modified to reflect a shortened or postponed season because, remember, arbitration stuff, it's all counting stats. A lot of it's like, how many wins did you get as a pitcher? How many saves did you get as a closer? How many home runs did you hit if you're a position player? That obviously will be impacted by if we're playing 100 games opposed to 162. So that's going to be weighed in. Sort of like, I would assume more of a projected out base. Like if we had played 162 games at your current production, you would have done this and had that factor into your arbitration number. The players have been advanced $170 million in salary, which is just 4% of total payrolls, and they will be paid on a prorated basis if the season plays as a shortened year. The only thing the players guarantee is $170 million. That's across all 30 teams. That's just 4% of the total payrolls in the sport. If we don't play another game this year, that's all they get. If we get some games down the stretch, let's say they play 100, they would pay a prorated portion of their salary. So they'll be paid a 100-game portion of the salary. Players have agreed not to sue for lost wages in this scenario, which, again, common sense. You all look like billionaires and fighting millionaires over money when a lot of people are out of jobs and seeking unemployment. That's a common sense thing. The interesting thing also here is the draft. The draft, as in pushback, can go back no later than July 20th. Rob Manfred can shorten it to as few as 5 rounds this year. Regularly, the draft is 40 rounds. They are doing it potentially as few as 5 rounds to help the team save some cash. Undrafted players can't receive signing bonuses of more than $20,000. Drafted players also only get $100,000 of their signing bonuses this year The rest will be split into 2 payments in 2021 and 2022. The international free agency signing period also be pushed back from July until January 2021 to run through December 2021. All of these things start to add up to the idea that the thing we talked about back in November about the potential contraction of about 42 minor league teams, I think that's a lock now. They're going to cut back on the amount of talent coming into the minor leagues. They're going to cut out some of the unprofitable things. This is organization going to try and save some money. That's something that's going to happen. Also of note, anyone who has a steroid or a drug suspension will have it served in 2020 even if no games are played. So your Michael Pinedas of the world who are serving steroid suspensions, they will get the credit for time served if the year doesn't play. They will be back to full strength in 2021. More draft stuff of note. Teams can't trade draft picks or slot money right now. I guess it's designed to encourage teams to not just take advantage of ones that are less better off financially. The 2021 draft also going to be shortened to at least 20 rounds if Rob Manfred deems it necessary. Those are the big financial implications of this deal. There's a lot of moving parts here. And a lot of these things will have effect on the new CBA, which is the contract expires after 2021. These things will have a direct ramification on the next deal. And you would think maybe with this time off, once things get back up, maybe you'll see the players and the owners get to the negotiating table, try and secure some labor peace because they're already losing a lot of revenue. And you're not going to want to risk the bad will of the public of, here we go, we just lost a significant portion of the 2020 season because of the coronavirus situation. And 2022, we're going on strike because we can't agree on a labor deal. I think you're getting labor peace out of this, which is a long-run positive for the whole thing. As far as this season concerned, I think it's clear at this point, nobody knows anything. We really don't. It's still in a day-by-day period. All of these things they're planning on are all well and good, but it is pointless to speculate right now. Until we have more information on this, until more people get tested for this virus and we know how wide it's spread and how long it takes people to recover and our healthcare system isn't being overwhelmed like it is right now, none of these things are going to matter for any of these sports. We kind of have to go one day at a time, see what the day gives us, get to the next day before we worry about, how many games teams are playing in July, August, if you even have games. I think it's pointless to try and predict a date. I also think it's pointless to predict that we're not going to have sports. We don't have it right now. We're not having it for the immediate future. I think the clearest path to action here is just, let's wait and see. One day at a time. We will eventually get sports back. Sports are not gone forever. It could be as early as June. Could be as late as July, August. Could be beyond that. That's the thing that's scary to people because we have no blueprint for this. It's not like a snowstorm when, okay, we are out of action for a day or two and then we're back. Or even something like a hurricane where you were impacted for a brief period of time. There is no end date right now. We just have to do what we're doing. It will work eventually. We will be back to normal eventually. Doctors are out there doing great things, trying to find vaccines for this drug, trying to find treatments to help people who are sick right now. That's our priority. Everything else that's fun will come back. But until then, we're kind of in a holding pattern. Baseball at least has recognized some of the issues it has, which is good. Hopefully soon enough, we'll be actually talking about how these things impact the players on the field as opposed to just speculating on when we're getting sports back. Those discussions for another day. But up next, we will talk some New York Giants football with Dan Duggan of The Athletic right after this.
They're coming after Jones, and a touchdown will end it to Caden Smith. And Daniel Jones, along with Barkley, career days today. Barkley, 190 rushing yards, and Jones, a 5-touchdown afternoon. 5 of them.
All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast. We're talking some New York Giants football today. Joining me on the line is the Giant beat reporter for The Athletic, Dan Duggan. Dan, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Mike?
Doing pretty good. Doing the best we can to stay safe, socially distance, and all that stuff. So it's nice to get people distracted and talk a little New York Giant football.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this offseason. I mean, this all kind of started back in January when they hired Joe Judge as the new head coach. Like, what was your take on the hire, and do you like it to this point?
I mean, like everybody else, my first reaction was who? Certainly, he wasn't a household name, and when the list of candidates they were going to interview for the position came out, he certainly wasn't, penciled in as a favorite. But as obviously I got to know him, as the rest of the world did, I think he was very impressive in that opening press conference, which I think a lot of times that can be overblown. But for a guy like him, who was really an unknown quantity, he had to go out and project a really strong image, and I think he did that. I mean, that will only carry you so far, but you only make a first impression once, and I think he made a strong one. It's so early. We're totally in the honeymoon period. Everyone kind of thinks their new coach is going to be Vince Lombardi at this stage. But I think he seems to have a plan, and I like sort of the fact that the Giants went outside the box here. I think one of the things that this franchise has sort of probably hurt itself with is kind of playing things safe and kind of sticking to what's comfortable. I mean, this is definitely a risk that they're taking. 38-year-old guy who's never been a head coach, but I think that sometimes no risk, no reward, and what they've been doing certainly hasn't been working. So now is as good time as ever to take a chance on a guy like Judge, who clearly they see some serious promise in.
Yeah, I would say from the Giant fans I've talked to, Joe Judge has a very high approval rating. Same can't be said for Dave Gettleman. We've seen him for a couple of years now. So how do you think he's done as the Giant GM in his tenure?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a bottom line business, so the results have been very good. I mean, you have to account for the fact that he didn't inherit a great situation. Obviously, coming off a 3-13 season and a franchise that's been headed in the wrong direction. But I think his first offseason was really bad. And I think they're still digging out from that. He came in a tough spot and made it worse by sort of the patchwork approach he had to that first off season, whether it's spending top dollar on Nate Solder, trading for the right to pay top dollar to Alex Ogletree. The Saquon pick is probably a debate for another day. I think just the whole idea of let's try to maximize whatever time Eli Manning had left and become a contender, was really short-sighted and really kind of foolish as we look back on it. I think since then, to his credit, he has sort of admitted his mistakes in both actions and in words. And, I think he is, pivoting to what this thing should have been, 2 years ago, which is, really a full rebuild. I mean, obviously they have the new quarterback in that they're going to try to build around. And I think the approach has changed drastically. And I think that is a good sign. Now, the big question is he signing the right players, drafting the right players? It's still early in that process, and it will be a process. So, we're not going to get those results overnight. I think, again, the rebuild should be further along, but I think he kind of, left things stuck in neutral there for the first 2 years, and it seems like now he's really starting to accelerate that and is making better moves. But again, we'll see, because again, results rule the day in his industry, and he's fully aware of that. So, another rough year, and he might not get to see this rebuilding process through.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one of his biggest lightning rod moves, I think even he under True Serum will tell you was probably a mistake, was the trade for Leonard Williams to give up the 2 picks for him. Obviously, he puts the franchise tag on him. So how long do you think, how big a contract do you think Leonard Williams is going to sign with this team in the long run?
I mean, that's a fascinating question right now, because I think there was sort of a perception that, either when the trade happened or, in the offseason that there was sort of a handshake deal and this would be, kind of no hassle to lock something up long term. And, here we are, free agency is, almost 2 weeks old, and, nothing is imminent as far as I understand. So there's a chance that they just don't come to an agreement and Leonard Williams plays this year, on the tag. And, hey, listen, there's worse things to do than to make $16 million guaranteed for one season of football and then, hit the market again at, age 26. So, I think Leonard Williams is in a good situation. Obviously, I think the Giants would like to come to a long-term agreement. I'm sure that's Williams' preference as well. But again, he's in a good spot here that he doesn't need to, take some low-ball offer. I've seen that, there's reports that the Giants want something multi-year in the 10 to 12 million average range. If I'm Leonard Williams, I don't see why you're taking that. I think, again, you get that $16 million in your pocket, and you have a chance to go maybe make even more next year when the cap's going to go up. So if I'm him, I'm probably not taking anything less than, let's say, $14 million a year. And even then, I think you're giving a little concession because, like I said, you got $16 million you can put in the bank right now. But so I would say something in the 3 years, $42 million, 3 years, $45 million would probably make sense. But again, as soon as Williams signs that tender, which he hasn't done yet, which I'm actually a little surprised that he's waiting, given the fact that Dave Gettleman has pulled the franchise tag once before with Josh Norman. I don't want to lock that up before I had something crazy happen like that. But I think once he signs that tender, he's sort of in the driver's seat. To listen, if they come with a great offer, hey, you sign it, and you know where you're going to be for the next 3-4 years. But otherwise, I don't think it's a really bad alternative for him to just play out this year. Hopefully have a better season than he just had, and even raise his value going into next offseason.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the whole thing about Gettleman pulling the tag on Josh Norman back into the Panthers. I saw SNY's Ralph Bacchiano put a theory out today about, is that a possibility down the road? What do you think it would take for Gettleman to even consider doing that here?
I think it's unlikely, because again, that was a very rare move. I mean, obviously Gettleman has done it, but it's just not something that's done around the league. And I don't think it's something you want to see a team make a habit of, because that would really, I think, really reflect poorly with agents and players and stuff like that. Who've done it twice in a 5-year span. So I think that's a total last resort. I know there's people out there saying, well, they should pull the tag and then use that money on Clowney. Listen, I guess that makes sense sort of in a kind of fancy football world, but in terms of it just wouldn't be good faith. I mean, Clowney was out there. If you wanted him, you could have just spent the money you already set aside for Williams then. So to pull it now, you'd really be kind of screwing Williams, because teams have already made their big expenditures. So you're putting him out at the market, at a tough time. And listen, it's a business. The Giants certainly would be within their right to do that, but I don't think that'd be a good way of doing business. And Gettleman, it's a tougher thing to do. He came in, inherited Josh Norman. Maybe it wasn't a guy that he really, felt highly about. Obviously, Norman played well, but I think Gettleman was easier to walk away from a guy like Norman. I mean, he put, his butt on the line to make the trade for Williams, to then pull the tag. I mean, I think it would just be sort of just such a disastrous move from a PR front or, whatever. I have a tough time seeing him actually following through with that. Again, there's no reason to think that Williams is going to be a destructive force or hold out. I mean, listen, they put the tag on. Again, if I'm Williams, I sign it. The fact that he hasn't, he does run that risk, but I think it's pretty low odds that Gettleman would do that again to somebody.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Let's go to some of the moves he's made so far. They bring back James Bradbury, who he drafted in Carolina. He brings him in to be the Giants' #1 corner. Do you like that move?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely needed, to make a move at corner. Obviously, when they moved on from Janoris Jenkins at the end of last season, that was made the spot that much weaker. There's a lot of young players there that were, at best, I would say, kind of up and down, as rookies or at least the first-year player in Sam Beal's case. So they couldn't go into the season with, just running it with the guys they had last year, because there's, some major question marks there. So they needed to get someone established. I think Byron Jones obviously was the top guy in the market. Giants had some interest there, but it just seemed like, both sides, I knew that wasn't going to fit. So, they set their sights on Bradbury, who I think was, pretty unanimously considered the second best corner. So, they got the second best guy on the market. They're paying him less than Jones. So, they, value kind of matched, what his skill set is. And, I don't think he's going to come in here and be, Patrick Peterson in his prime or Darrelle Revis in his prime, but I think he's, very good, solid corner. You like the fact that he's 26 years old. I mentioned Jenkins. He's a guy who was sort of up and down and, just kind of a quirky personality. I think Bradbury, from all accounts, very solid guy, durable, not going to make any waves. So I think that shores up a weakness. And, again, I think he's going to be a good, solid player. Might not be an all-pro, but still definitely an upgrade at a position that really needed one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I feel like Giant fans, I know also have been screaming for years this team needs linebackers. They've had a big one in Blake Martinez. How would you view that deal? I know some people were saying, maybe they overpaid a little bit when a better linebacker, Coylton, got just a little bit more to go to the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little less enthused about the Martinez signing. I think he's a solid player. I think he's, better than Al Ogletree or whatever other options they would have had on the roster. Yeah, I mean, Corey Littleton, Joe Schobert, guys who were also available who ended up, making similar salaries. I mean, Schobert's deal's 5 years, but end of the day, they're all in that sort of $10, $11, $12 million a year range. So, they could have afforded those guys, but it really feels like they locked in on Martinez from the outset. I think a big part of that is Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, was the linebackers coach at Green Bay 2 years ago, so he knows Martinez very well, but, have a high comfort level that this guy's going to be in the middle of my defense, getting everybody lined up, calling the shots. And, I think Martinez, from everything I've heard, checks all the boxes as far as intangibles and leadership. So I totally understand why, I think Patrick Graham, you want that guy running your defense. I just don't know that he's going to be a huge difference maker. And for $10, $11 million a year, I think, you might have been able to spend that money on someone who's going to make a bigger impact. Martinez is going to lead this team in tackles for the next 3 years, barring injuries. That's a lock. I mean, the guy, he racks up tackles. I just don't know that he's a real difference-making player, and I think this is a defense that did need the difference makers. So, solid in the middle, but, when you look at what they have at edge rusher, even free safety, I don't know if the resources on Martinez, could have been used elsewhere and maybe yielded a greater return.
Yeah, the Giants also made a bunch of secondary moves, but I feel like they still have some issues. Like, what do you think is the biggest thing that you're surprised they've not really addressed yet?
I mean, there's just touch on it. Definitely edge rusher. I mean, even Gettleman acknowledged after the season, I think he was on WFAN, and they asked him, what's the biggest sort of hole on this roster that you need to address? And he, flat out said, I think we need to improve our pass rush. And I just don't know how you can look at the moves they've made, so far and come to the conclusion that it's improved. I mean, I guess best case scenario, if Tyler Fackrell bounces back to the form he had in 2018 when Graham was with him in Green Bay, maybe he's, equitable to Marcus Golden, but they didn't go out and obviously, get Jadeveon Clowney, a lot of the top edge rushers, got franchise tags, so that sort of shrank that pool a little bit, but it wasn't a great pass rush last year, and, there's really no notable upgrades that they brought in to date, and even you look at the draft, unless Chase Young somehow slides to the 4th pick, there isn't some slam dunk, edge guy that they can get who they can plug in from day one and count on to be, a real disruptive force off the edge. I think that definitely sticks out as a weakness, and maybe the options are a little bit limited, but still surprised they weren't a bit more aggressive in trying to address that spot.
Yeah, so obviously that's a big issue, but like if you had to give the Giants, like as of recording, like a free agency grade, what would you give them?
It's so hard because listen, I don't ever pretend to be a scout. I mean, you talk to people and you get as much information as you can, but so often I think everyone thought the Nate Solder signing was pretty good a couple of years ago, and that certainly hasn't panned out. So I'll give it a B, but I'll give it a B in this sense. Like, I don't know if Blake Martinez is going to be a really good inside linebacker for the next 3 years. Like, I think a guy like Cameron Bradbury, their floors are pretty high and the ceilings are probably relatively low. So I think they are probably going to be solid players. But the reason I'll give them a B is I like their approach to this offseason. They really changed their way of doing business, whereas in the past they've given out lucrative signing bonuses, which allows them to maybe add a few more big money players, but it adds pain down the line if you want to get out of those contracts. So, I mean, you look at 2016 with Jenkins, Olivier Vernon, and Damon Harrison. They signed all those guys to 5-year deals with signing bonuses. None of them finished those deals, so when they got rid of them, whether it was trades or cuts, every single one of them left dead money on their cap. I mean, obviously the Odell trade, the JDP trade, all those types of moves, they gave big signing bonuses, and that has hurt them in their cap going forward because they bailed on those guys so early, and they really can't cut Nate Solder right now because it would just be kind of cost prohibitive in terms of the cap. So I like the way they structured this deal. So instead of giving big signing bonuses that prorate over the length of the contract, they went roster bonuses in year one. So, Blake Martinez, James Bradbury have very high cap hits this year, but, going forward, the final 2 years of their deal, they're lower, and there's no real commitment, so the Giants can get out of both of these deals after 2 years, which, again, you're not planning on doing. But it's good to just have that flexibility. And I think it's smart that, while they're rebuilding, they didn't need to go all in to try to fit, one more stud into this class. Get some solid players in here, make some strides in 2020, and then go into the next offseason with a ton of cap space again. And then you can really, maybe hopefully accelerate the process, because I think this is really sort of, ground zero or, a little above that because you do have Jones in here. So that was a big piece to the rebuild. But I just like the approach. I mean, remains to be seen if the actual execution, will turn into wins, which is obviously the ultimate goal.
Yeah, it definitely is the ultimate goal. And I think, like, one thing you brought up, I also wanted to ask your opinion on. It's like we are now basically a year out of that Odell Beckham trade. I know it was blasted at the time. You think a year out, do you think it makes more sense to the Giants that they did it?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks better, now than it did a year ago when I was, a big critic of the trade. I think Odell certainly didn't have the type of season in Cleveland, and the Browns themselves didn't have the type of season that a lot of people expected. So I guess we'll see if he has another year like that. It'll even look even better. I think when you look at the return, it was a pretty good return. So you look at what the Texans, that disastrous DeAndre Hopkins trade, I mean, that was, made the Odell return look a lot better. You look at Stephon Diggs, and, I think Minnesota got a pretty good return there. And I don't think he's as good a player as Odell. So, I mean, I think the return was solid. At the same time, like, let's see what those players turn into, too, because I'm not, convinced that your Bill Peppers or Dexter Lawrence or O'Shane Ximines are going to be real, game-changing type players. And, Odell at his best certainly was that. And you look at this offense, and they do lack that sort of big play weapon at receiver. Maybe Darius Slayton becomes that, but it was a little tough at times last year to see how much these receivers struggle to get separation. You think, man, imagine this offense if Daniel Jones is throwing to Odell. But no, I definitely think the trade, looked better at the 1 year mark than it did, right when it happened. And again, I think this is going to be probably a big year to determine, really how it's viewed, because I did not expect Odell to, have such a sort of eager output in year one in Cleveland. It seemed like that everything was sort of a disaster there with Freddie Kitchens and with Mayfield and everything. So maybe they, turn things around and the views change again. But I definitely think you have to feel better about it if you're the Giants. And I'm sure Dave Gettleman feels a little bit of vindication because obviously he was crushed at the time of the trade.
Yeah, he was. And I think he has one big asset left to play this year, which is the 4th pick in the draft. And where do you think they're going to go with that? So I've heard them linked to linemen, I've heard them linked to Isaiah Simmons. Like, what do you feel like they're going to try and do there?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the two obvious fits, and, the matchup with value would be either Isaiah Simmons, or an offensive tackle. I think a lot of people would like to see them trade back, and it does seem like Gettleman, who has never traded back in 7 drafts, is at least open to that possibility. Of course, it takes 2 to tango, so you need to find a trade partner, so it's hard to go too far down that hypothetical. But if they just stay at number 4, if they can't find some of the trades, I definitely think it comes down to tackle or Simmons. I feel like, all things being relatively equal, and I don't know what the draft board looks like. I think you have to go tackle. I think that's just been a weak spot on this roster for so long, and it's a chance. There's guys that are considered, top 10 worthy picks. So they're in that position where if you can find that guy to protect Daniel Jones' blind side, to open holes for Saquon Barkley, it really makes those picks that much better. I mean, I know Isaiah Simmons is a unique talent and would probably make a huge impact on this defense. At the same time, I do feel like that type of player, you might be able to find other ways. It's really hard to find these top tackles. And if you really love one of them and you're sitting there, I think, Ty kind of has to go to that position because it's just such a valuable position, such an important position. And top tackles just don't hit the market. I mean, you saw, Jack Conklin was really the only guy who cashed in this offseason. Giants didn't go after him. So by the fact that they kind of sat back and haven't really addressed tackle, to me, that sort of is a hint that that's why they're leaning with that first round pick. But of course, it's an unpredictable process. So who knows?
Yeah, my last question is this. You mentioned that Dave Gamble has never traded back, and obviously there's a faction of the fan that thinks it's a smart thing to do with teams like Miami and the Chargers possibly looking for quarterbacks long term. Like, how big a deal is it that Gamble has never done it in terms of maybe he's going to change his mind now, or he's just set in his ways that I can't pass on this guy because he kind of a gold jacket on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's sort of a flaw in his approach. I mean, and again, it's not just him; it's just sort of organizational. I mean, Jerry Reed, he never traded back in 10, 11 drafts over he ran. Ernie Accorsi, I think he traded back for Kiwanuka, and otherwise, I don't know if he ever did it. It's just something about the way that school of GM, they kind of they're big on the bird in hand is worth 2 in the bush. They don't like the unknown of trading back and flipping picks. And listen, you look at some of the best teams and most well-run organizations in the league. Obviously, you look at the Patriots, and they trade in picks left and right. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to hit on the picks, but the kind of the point of trading is it's a complete crapshoot. So give yourself more cracks to the plate. Like the number 4 pick versus number 8 pick. The odds of nailing that, aren't maybe that great, but let me just take the 8th pick and then pick up 2 more picks in the middle round. Just, like I said, just kind of increase your odds of finding players. Because to think that I know that this guy I'm going to take at number 4 is going to be a star, going to be a gold jacket player, I think that's, overconfidence that I think definitely has bled into Gettleman's decision making. But hey, they totally adjusted the way they structure contracts this free agency. So, maybe the old dog can learn new tricks and also embrace trading back. He's got a guy, Joe Judge, who spent formative years in New England, so he certainly has seen the value of that approach. So things are lined up for them to do it if Gettleman is ever going to break that trend.
All right, there we have it. Dan Duggan on the Giants. Dan, thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how do people follow you on social media and keep up with what you're writing on The Athletic about the Giants?
So Twitter is just DDuggan21, and then, The Athletic. Hopefully people are pretty well aware of that right now. And we're actually running a 90-day free trial during all this, craziness where there's not a lot of sports going on. We're still producing a lot of content, though, so people can, just go to theathletic.com and check that out and, give us a look. And after 3 months, and hopefully sports are back, you can see if it's worth keeping. But, I promise in those next 3 months, I'll be putting out a lot of Giants content, and, all my colleagues will be covering their beats as best we can in this kind of crazy time.
Yeah, I'm a big Athletic reader. I love the stuff you guys are doing over there. Dan, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
All right, and there you have it. That was Dan Duggan of The Athletic talking Giants football. Up next, we'll go from the beat reporter's perspective to the fans' perspective. I'm going to be joined by a couple of Giant fans on the Giants edition of the Fan Forum right after this.
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell.
This is the Fan Forum.
All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast. Time for the Fan Forum, New York Football Giants edition. We already heard from Dan Duggan from The Athletic about the Giants offseason, some stuff like that. Now we're going to talk to some Giant fans to break down the storyline surrounding Big Blue and to head through the offseason. First up, one of the most prolific Giant ranters we know, and somebody we last talked to, I think, back in week number 1 of the football season, Justin Diaz. Justin, welcome back. How are you?
Thanks, Mike. All things considered, I'm doing pretty well. How's everything going with you throughout all this craziness?
Doing pretty good. The podcast is doing okay in the social distancing era. Hopefully we are not talking about no sports forever. I'm hoping by summer we're actually watching sports again.
I hope so. I'm not very optimistic about that, but time will tell.
Time will tell, indeed. Also on the line with us, he's been doing some legal spots for us. He's also a big New York Giants fan, Phil Fraietta. Phil, welcome back. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me back. I'm good. All things considered, hanging in there.
Yeah, hanging in there, indeed. Let's try and distract the people a little. Let's not go into doomsday about whether or not we'll actually have a baseball season. Let's talk a little Giants football. So I'll throw the question to you first, Phil. Give me your thoughts right now on if you think the Giants are going in the right direction or the wrong direction.
Well, Dave Gettleman's still the general manager, so they're going in the wrong direction. That's my feelings on that man are well known to listeners of this podcast. As long as Gettleman's employed, the Giants are not going to win, and that's not because he is intentionally trying to sabotage them. He's just inept. He's running the organization like it's 2005, and he's continuing to do that in this offseason. He's brought in veteran players on bad contracts. The Leonard Williams, tagging was the ultimate disaster. They're paying Leonard Williams like a top-notch defensive lineman now, and I don't have to tell you this, Mike. You know he's not. And they traded some draft picks to get him. So Gettleman, I guess the best way to say it is he does not understand that there are certain positions that have priority over others in modern football. He continues to prioritize run-stuffing linebackers and defensive tackles, and as he does that, they will continue to have a Swiss cheese pass defense. That's really the best way to say it.
All right, Justin, I'll throw it to you. What do you think about the Giants? Right direction, wrong direction?
I mean, I obviously completely agree with Phil. We talk about this a lot offline, over text with Phil's brother, Nick, actually. It's more of the same. I will say there's nothing this offseason that has been an absolute atrocity or calamity that's just going to completely crater the team for years to come. And that's the standard for Gettleman, unfortunately. If he's not doing that, he's actually doing a relatively good job compared to what he's done in the past. Like trading your potential Hall of Fame wide receiver down the line for a mid-first round pick and a mediocre strong safety. Those are franchise-altering in a bad way trades. This offseason, I mean, it's nothing that makes me optimistic or happy. I agree that tagging Leonard Williams was not the right move. I mean, with Gettleman, the floor, the expectation is so bad that I'm honestly happy they didn't just dole out some crazy 4 or 5 year deal with an enormous guaranteed amount of money, like a huge signing bonus. So, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. Like, if you put a 5-year-old behind the wheel and he manages to not crash and kill himself, you're happy. But if he dings up the car, you can't say good job and clap, but you're expecting so little and you're expecting such disaster that when a complete disaster doesn't happen, I guess you're like, all right, this isn't so bad. And my hope is, to answer your question, no, they're not heading in the right direction because, like Phil said, Dave Gettleman's still getting a paycheck bi-weekly, I assume, from John Mara. But they did front-load these contracts with these guys, like Blake Martinez, James Bradbury. I guess they're not huge guarantees that will, if they don't work out, they're not going to be killing them 2 or 3 years down the road. So my hope is, well, I know they're going to be bad again this year. That's not changing no matter what happens in the draft, the rest of the offseason. So my hope is they're bad again, and they finally wake up and fire Gettleman. And luckily, he didn't leave them with too much of a disaster, capitalize 2 or 3 years down the road, and they hire someone competent who can kind of clean things up. So that's a long way of saying, no, they're not heading in the right direction. But this offseason, there really was so many holes. I don't know what Gettleman could have done to fix it like this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Dan Duggan earlier in the podcast. One thing he was big on is like, yeah, Gettleman made a big mistake at the beginning of his tenure by trying to, load up and make a run with Eli's last stand, basically. And that was basically a mistake. But the way he describes it, you know what, like, now he's doing it. Is it too little, too late? We'll see. But, like, as you guys have said, he basically pointed out the same thing. Like, the moves they're making right now, they're pretty good. They make sense. James Bradbury fills a hole at corner. Blake Martinez is a big linebacker, and they've needed linebackers for years. But, like, again, this should have been done 2 years ago. And I agree with you guys that this is just sort of an indictment that Gettleman just did not get what he was walking into the first time around. He walked into a bad situation, and you know what? Did not help make it better.
Yeah, so, Mike, I just want to chime in here, too, because we talked about Gettleman, and I'm assuming we're going to transition to the coach at some point, but maybe now's a good time to do that, too, because like Justin said, we can hope and pray that Gettleman's only going to be here for 1 more year. So maybe the long-term future of the franchise is more so in the coach's hands, and I'm not going to judge, sorry to use that word twice, but I'm not going to judge him without having seen him coach a
Can I just add something that's very important?
Sure.
What would happen if Aaron Judge? Sorry,
I don't know. I'd like to hear his opinion. Maybe you can get him on sometime, Mike.
Well, I mean, he's not doing too much right now. I mean, he's just rehabbing, so maybe we have a chance to get a connection there.
Yeah, you might be able to get him on. But anyway, what I was saying is I know the guy has not coached a single game yet, so it's not fair to really criticize him. But that said, I'm not impressed whatsoever by what I've seen so far. In fact, I'm concerned. When an NFL head coach says things like nobody has a guaranteed starting job on his team, he sounds like an idiot. And I don't use that word lightly. He just sounds like a moron. This is not high school football. Saquon Barkley is going to start at running back for the Giants. Daniel Jones is going to start at quarterback. There's no competition, and pretending that there is, you really just sound like a moron. So that concerned me a lot.
Yeah, Justin, what do you feel about Judge?
I had very little opinion of him one way or the other. I didn't, when they first hired him, I didn't even know who he was until like a week before they hired him. So I can't say I have a strong opinion about him one way or the other. I agree with Phil on it's comically dumb because he's clearly lying when he says no one has a starting job. That's not the problem. Like, I'm not concerned that they're not going to start Saquon or they're going to play Colt McCoy instead of Daniel Jones. But it's like Phil said, the idea that he feels the need to give off this perception of everyone has a fair shake. And, if Colt McCoy comes out and starts ripping passes in training camp, he has a shot to start. That's clearly a lie. So the idea, the fact that he thinks that that's the right mentality to maintain when you're around grown men that are playing football for a living, you're not around myself and Phil. I only played football senior year, but Phil played. A bunch of our friends played. He's not dealing with us. He's dealing with grown men that are playing for a paycheck. Colt McCoy knows he's not starting. Daniel Jones is starting. So that mentality worries me. It kind of reminds me of Greg Schiano. I'm sure you guys both remember him. I'll never forget one year the Giants and Bucks were playing a game, and the Giants were kneeling down. The game was over, and Schiano had his guys light up Eli on the kneel down, and his excuse was he played till the whistle, even though the game was over. And at that point, I knew this guy was going to be fired soon, and sure enough, he was gone. This dumb high school and maybe some college mentality, it doesn't work. I'm hoping it's just lip service and it's not something he's going to maintain, but that'll grow old quickly for players. That's what I think. But as far as the tactician, his ability to lead, it's hard to say, but that quote did worry me as well.
Yeah, my perspective on it is this, because obviously you know that, he comes from the Belichick tree. It feels like sort of a Belichick isn't about, do your job, all this, all that. But the thing that would concern me is, yes, he won the press conference, but, the Belichick assistants have a terrible track record as NFL head coaches. I mean, you look at Bill O'Brien, you look at Romeo Crennel, Matt Patricia, Mangini, the list goes on. I can't remember the last guy off the Belichick tree who's actually been a successful NFL head coach.
I agree. I don't know anybody, and that is concerning, certainly.
Yeah, it hasn't been good. I will say Bill O'Brien, I think, is actually a pretty good head coach. He's historic. He's a Gettleman-level bad GM, trading DeAndre Hopkins for an atrocious contract. But I think he's a solid coach. The rest are bad. And Mike Vrabel is not a Belichick coach. Let's get that out there, because I've heard people say you can use him as an example. You can't. He played for him. That's not a coaching tree. But that's neither here nor there. Joe Judge being under Belichick is not a positive. That the evidence has shown that usually actually hasn't worked out. Matt Patricia's a terrible coach, and there's no chance he makes it past this year. This is his last year as a coach, if he even makes it through the whole season. If there is a season.
Yeah, well, I got to put the asterisk there for sure. About if nobody knows anything at this point, so it could be a football season, that could not be. But I want to counter on Bill O'Brien for a second. He's an awful head coach. He's won a bad division a couple of times, but this team, with all the talent they have, they should have gotten further than the second round of the playoffs, at least once. And last year, the 24-0 lead was egregious against the Chiefs. They blew the lead against the Bills and should have lost that game if not for the Bills out collapsing the Texans. I mean, Bill O'Brien's not a good coach. Let's be real.
He's not a great coach, but if you lead your team to the playoffs almost every year, you're not a bad coach. He might not be an elite coach, but I think people tend to talk in extremes with coaches. You're either really good or you're terrible, but there is an in between. If you're coaching your team in the playoffs, the Texans some loaded roster that you expect to be a Super Bowl team every year. I don't think that. I think the Chiefs are a much better team, and they should have won. It looked worse because they got up to an early lead because the Chiefs dropped 15 passes. But I agree. I'm not going to sit here and defend Bill O'Brien, but I think he's a solid coach. He clearly is capable of coaching a team in the league. He's not I can't think of any disastrous coaches, but he's not one of them.
Matt Patricia.
An NFL coach. Yeah, exactly. He's not Matt Patricia.
I mean, come on, Mike. You should know this better than anybody. Todd Bowles, Eric Mangini, list goes on and on, right?
Pretty much. Throw Adam Gase on there, too.
You throw him on there, too, sure.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to the Giants. We'll not waste everybody more time on Bill O'Brien. Everybody knows he's not a great head coach. Let's go to the quarterback for a minute. We haven't really talked much about Daniel Jones this offseason. I'll go to you first, Justin. Your opinion on the year one of Daniel Jones.
I mean, I had such a low opinion of him when they drafted him. I was on your podcast. I said it will go down as one of the worst picks in the history of sports. I own saying that. It clearly was hyperbole. Oh, I said I didn't think at the time it was hyperbole. I really felt that strongly. He showed he has the chance to be a good NFL quarterback. I don't feel strongly that he will be. I think the fumbling was ridiculous. He just can't field a pass rush. I don't know if that's something that gets much better over time. I really don't. I think he throws a nice deep ball. I still don't think he has the strongest, like an elite arm. He has a nice deep ball. He has really good ball placement sometimes, but then other times he seems to sail passes, puts too much air under it, gives the secondary too much time to get there. I think it was a promising rookie season, and it kind of leaves the future. I look at it as a toss-up. Will he be good or not? I mean, there's a chance. I'm not like dead set, all right, this guy's the guy, but I think there's a chance. And that's a lot more than I could have thought when they drafted him. So that's what I'll say about it.
On a pass-fail, I'd say he passed, but I'm not going to say he got an A either. I kind of equate him to so when he came up, and I guess when he started making his first few games, you're like, wow, Daniel Jones, this guy looks great. But you kind of have to remember, well, who am I comparing him to? And I'm comparing him to what was Eli Manning at the end of his career, who really just was not an NFL starter anymore. So you have to take yourself back and realize, okay, is this guy actually good, or is he just better than Eli? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the thing with Jones you like is he's got mobility. He clearly got better as the year went on. There are issues with the fumbling you got to worry about. I think he's got a nice floor. The question with me is the ceiling, and I'm curious what you guys think. Like, if you had your choice of like young quarterback right now, would you rather have him or would you rather have Sam Darnold? Because Darnold has more turnover issues than Jones. I think it'd be harder to fix, but I feel like he's got more elite like physical ability than Daniel Jones does in terms of throwing the football.
Darnold, without a question. The Jones, and I've used this analogy off air to Justin before, but he reminds me a lot of, I don't know, and I'm going to baseball here, Mike, but I don't know if you remember when the Yankees called up Miguel Andujar, everybody was like, oh, see, this guy can play third base because he was capable of picking up a ground ball and throwing it across the diamond like any high school baseball player in America. But when you actually watch him over a course of a season, you're like, oh, this guy actually can't play third base at a major league level. He can make routine plays. He doesn't look like a child, but he doesn't really look like a star either. And Jones, I'm worried, may end up in the same kind of boat where, yeah, he's an NFL quarterback, no doubt. He's better than washed up Eli Manning was, but is he a stud? He doesn't really have any attributes or abilities that would make me think he's a stud like Sam Darnold does. Sam Darnold has a very accurate arm, a very strong arm compared to Jones. It's concerning. But that said, he was a lot better than I thought he would be. It's difficult to evaluate him because, like I said, you're comparing him to a washed-up Eli Manning.
Yeah, Justin, any thoughts on that question with the Daniel Jones versus Darnold question?
I don't feel as strongly as Phil does. I used to like Sam Darnold a lot. I still think Darnold will be good. There's just, and you watched him a lot more than I did, but what I gathered, there's still some like unbelievably dumb decisions that are so head scratching. Am I right in saying that? There's just some games you're like, what the heck is he doing?
Yes, I think that's right. I think the way I would phrase it, I feel like Jones has the higher floor than Darnold does. I think Darnold has a higher ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I do still think Darnold, as long as the Jets settle the situation where, I mean, Gase is the coach, like or not. If Gase can manage to do a good job and build a good offense, and they surround him with a better line and weapons, I think Darnold. If you had made me pick one, I would pick Darnold. I don't love either of them right now, and going into the year, I really did like Darnold a lot. Still think he will ultimately be good, but I'm not as sure of it. I mean, granted, it was a weird year for him. He had the mono and missed some games and had that atrocious game against New England. I guess I'll say Darnold, but I'm not particularly confident in it anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, like, you're at the point where you're a Jet fan, like, and me, like, you would have hoped going into this year you knew that Sam Darnold was your guy. Like, I still think he will be, but I can't say for sure he will be because he did not take that big leap that the guys you take from year one to year two. And I'm sure the mono played a role in it. The line played a role in it. This year is big for both the quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's a big year for the quarterbacks. Now, here's another problem. You're asking me to evaluate Sam Darnold based on what I see rather than what would be unseen. So I can't tell you how Sam Darnold will play if he was on the Giants. He's on the Jets. Adam Gase is his coach, so you got to give him a little bit of a break given those two things. But yeah, he certainly needs to perform better than he has been. But I'd still take him over Jones if you gave me a choice.
All right, let's go to the free agency period. We talked a little bit about it before. They bring in James Bradbury to be the number one corner. They bring in Blake Martinez to be their top linebacker, replace Alec Ogletree. They made a bunch of smaller moves as well. Justin, give me the Giants free agency grade. How would you grade it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'll say a 5. I mean, or 6 maybe. I whatever exactly average that doesn't move the needle either way. Like the only, again, to me, the positive is the contracts are front loaded. There's no albatross contracts that are going to hurt them in 2 or 3 years. Bradbury was, you can't knock that. That was a good signing. They're desperate for a solid NFL starting cornerback, and he might be better than that. He's probably good. They were so desperate. Their secondary is so pathetic last year. They absolutely had to sign someone just to be there and that they know they can rely to be good. Blake Martinez, he literally doesn't make a difference, in my opinion. Someone who racks up tackles. I know I was reading today, he claims he's a better coverage linebacker than he gets credit for. Of course, he's not going to say, yeah, I suck at coverage and I can't cover anyone. But from what I've read, he's not good in coverage. That's where they struggled immensely across the middle of the field. Guys are wide open constantly. So someone who doesn't rush the passer, he racks up tackles, great. He's a cleanup tackler, and he's not making plays in the backfield. That doesn't make a difference to me in today's NFL. And then they didn't get a single legitimate pass rusher. They had got no offensive line help. So they had so many needs, and so few of them were actually filled. But again, it's like the power of Gettleman in a negative way is it could have been worse. He could have rolled out massive guaranteed contracts. So he didn't do that. So I'm grateful for that. So I'll give it a 5 or a 6.
Phil, how about you?
I agree. 5. I mean, they haven't destroyed their future, but they also, again, this is kind of what I was getting at with Gettleman and his lack of positional understanding, or understanding of positional value, I should say. They don't have a pass rusher on the team. There is nobody on that team who can rush the passer. That the pass rusher is the second most important player on the field behind the quarterback. They don't have one. They don't have a left tackle. Probably the third most important position on the field. Now, and I understand maybe they'll draft somebody and maybe they could fill one of those 2 holes that way. But without a legitimate pass rush and without a legitimate left tackle, they just have no chance of competing. That's the reality. So Blake Martinez, yeah, he may rack up a bunch of tackles 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage or beyond the line of scrimmage. That's great. But they're still going to give up 30 points a game if they don't get a pass rush.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys. I'm like really, I think, right about like a 6 for him, because I think the moves they made were good. I think that the thing that Dan Duggan also pointed out earlier was like he was stunned that they did not go get a pass rusher, because on an interview with WFAN, I think probably with Joe and Evan earlier in the offseason, he said that his number one priority was a pass rusher. He did not get one. I get that there were a lot of them that got tagged, but you would think maybe at least bring back Marcus Golden. Hasn't done that yet. I also think that they could have gotten a lot more help than they actually did for their money. Like, say what you want about the Jets, but Joe Douglas has gotten a lot of players in there and improved the team's depth. I don't feel like the Giants really – I think they got a couple more higher-end guys than the Jets did, but I feel like they still have depth questions throughout the roster.
Oh, their depth is terrible. And it's been that way for years. It took me a while to realize that. I used to think, oh, man, the Giants are so unlucky with injuries, but every team in the NFL has injuries. The problem with the Giants is the guy who they have come in for the injured player is just terrible because they have no depth. And that's based on years of poor drafting by Jerry Reese and now continuing with Dave Gettleman.
No, I agree. The depth is bad. I mean, the starters are bad, so I wouldn't expect them to have good depth. I noticed you said they may find some good players. They really didn't. I mean, Bradbury's good, but who else? Like Sackrell or Blake Martin? Like, these guys are. If you don't have them, I feel like there's basically no difference to your team. I don't. Not to be. I know. I feel like Phil hammer the Giants constantly, but it's the only realistic assessment of what they do. Like people can talk themselves into Blake Martinez being a difference maker. He's not going to be. He's an inside linebacker. It doesn't matter in today's NFL unless it's someone like Luke Kuechly, really a great player, an athletic playmaker who's going to really change the game.
These are plug-and-play players, Mike. It reminds me a lot of when they went out and got Alec Ogletree. Now, that was a worse move because of the contract, but he didn't make a single difference. You could watch every Giant game that he was there and have no idea he was even on the field. So I understand that he may have a decent rating in Madden, but when it comes to real 2020 football, he's basically useless.
Yeah, I like Bradbury signing because I think you could not have gotten into the season with a bunch of young corners. You need a veteran there, and I was not going to go back up a truck with Byron Jones. So Bradbury, like Martinez, I question because, yes, he tackles, but he can't cover. And I feel like when you see a guy like Corey Littleton out there who got just a little bit more money per year, I would have paid a little more to get the guy who can play all three downs, have a guy who can get schemed off the field on passing downs. All right, let's go ahead to the draft for a little bit because the Giants are in an interesting spot. They have pick number 4. They had the potential to trade down, even though Gettleman historically has never traded down. And there's they have the quarterback. Teams like Miami, the Chargers, possibly the Jags could be looking to trade up for a quarterback. What do you think the Giants should do at 4? I'll go to Phil first on this one.
So Gettleman is very lucky here. Because it's almost impossible to screw this up. What he should do is trade down, but he won't do that. He's probably going to draft an offensive tackle, and they need an offensive tackle, so that is not a terrible thing. It fits into his playbook of we need hog mollies or whatever he likes to call them. So he's in a position where it's almost impossible for him to screw up this pick. They should trade down. It's a no-brainer to trade down and acquire assets because they're not going to compete next year anyway. Unless you tell me, and I admit I'm not qualified to make this assessment, unless you could tell me there is somebody in this draft who is the next Jonathan Ogden, he's a stud, you have to pick him at 4, they should trade down. But Gettleman won't do that because he doesn't believe in it. So he'll end up picking a tackle, which is not a disaster. They need a tackle. The big problem is, unfortunately, if they beat the Redskins in that meaningless game, so they can't get Chase Young. But that's not Gettleman's fault. That is what it is.
Justin, how about you? What would you think the Giants should do it for?
One thing I want to address. There is one way Gettleman could screw this up within the realm of possibility. Like he's not going to take a puncher for it. There is a stud defensive tackle out of Auburn by the name of Derek Brown, and anytime there's a big decision that Gettleman typically goes with the worst possible choice, like in picking number 2 in a quarterback-loaded draft with the best offensive lineman prospect ever, maybe with Quentin Nelson, he took a running back. That's neither here nor there. Don't be shocked if he takes Derek Brown out of Auburn, is all I'm saying. What
I didn't know about that. Sorry to cut you off. I didn't know that guy was in the draft. I take that back. He will probably pick him and screw it up.
Yeah. And I agree that they should trading down would be ideal. Although I won't, like Phil said, if they take an offensive tackle that's worthy of that pick and he's a plug and play guy that from day one will be a good offensive tackle, you can't be upset about that because they desperately need an offensive tackle for the short term and for long term. Their offensive line, both their tackles, Soldier is atrocious and Remmer's still a free agent. But trade down would be ideal. If not, I would take an offensive tackle. I wouldn't even be that. Isaiah Simmons, I'm on the fence. He's a weird size. I think he's 6'4", like 235. I don't know what he'd play, but everyone's insisting he's the next like Derwin James. It's hard to say. He'd be upset if he took a guy like that, but I think the right move would be trade down or offensive tackle.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Gettleman is, like, boggles my mind is, like, I know he said he's open to trading down, but he's never done it in 7 drafts. And he seems to have the mentality of, like, oh, gold jacket guy, can't pass on the gold jacket guy, which, I mean, it's one thing if you're like, oh, Jonathan Ogden is staring me in the face, I'm going to take him there. But, like, if you don't know that for sure, and someone's offering you a boatload of picks, move up 2 spots, I feel like that's something you have to do, and I don't know if he'll do it.
Yeah, if they trade down, that's, to me, a serious sign that the shift in power has happened, and Joe Judge has a lot of say in what's going on, because they had literally the most obvious trade down scenario maybe ever in that draft where they took Saquon, and assuming they didn't take they weren't taking a quarterback, which we know they were not taking a quarterback. Given that fact, it was the easiest. They would have gotten so much if they traded down, and instead they took a running back. If you're not doing it then, you're never doing it. So if they trade down, to me, that signals that Joe Judge has a lot of say in what's happening.
I agree with that entirely. And my opinion with where they are operating on something, I don't think they're going to stay where they are. I don't think they're trading down. It's like, I think you can never go wrong drafting an offensive lineman. Simmons, I know, can be a big difference maker on the defense you play in, right? But I think they've addressed defense. They need a left tackle. I think if you're in a spot where you have your pick of the guys, and it sounds like they'll have their pick of the 4 guys, I think you have to pick the one you like the best, because you've seen in free agency, none of the tackles get there. If they do, they get massively overpaid. Go get one on a rookie deal, and then you can set yourself up for a long time.
Yeah, so I'm afraid of the jack of all trades defensive player for the Giants, to be honest with you. And the reason why is I feel that those players fit better on teams that have some talent on defense already. Like a Troy Polamalu type fit better on the Steelers because they already had a good defense. If you bring a guy in like that and then put him on a bad defense, I don't think he makes that big of a difference. So I'm afraid of that, but I don't think that really is a Gettleman pick anyway. A defensive tackle would be a Gettleman pick, but knowing him, he's not going to trade down. So let's just hope that he lucks into the next Jonathan Ogden.
I think that makes some sense. Now, last thing here. Let's operate the hypothetical here that we're playing a full 16-game season next year. Now, it's a risky hypothetical right now. So there's no sports going on. We'll go with it. If there's a full season, based on the roster here, let's assume they give them a left tackle at pick 4. How many wins do you think this Giants team can get? I'll go to Justin first on that.
I'll say 5. And it's not scientific, but it's a bad, every time I've been on this podcast, I've said the same thing. It's a bad team. That's not changing. It hasn't changed. There's just nothing. They're not good at anything. And no matter who they draft, they'll still not be good at anything. And they're quite bad at a lot of things. So 5 wins, would it shock me if they won 6? No. Would it shock me if they won 3? No. So, but I'll just say 5. It's just, that's a bad team. It's bad at everything. So I'll say 5 wins. Keep it simple.
Phil, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to say 5 as well. I'll say 4 if you want, just to be different. But, I think the 4 to 6 win range is where the Giants are. That's they're, for the same reasons Justin said, they're not good. They're probably the worst team in their own division. So, add that up, then they're going to just continue to lose games. But I think as a Giants fan, and it's hard to do this, I've myself have had a very hard time adjusting to it, but you have to root for them to lose, because the only way that the organization turns it around is Gettleman gets fired. So the absolute worst thing that could happen to the Giants this year is if they luck themselves into a 7 or 8 win season, which is doable in the NFL. And if that happens, the franchise is going to get set back for many, many years. So you just have to hope that they lose. I guess I'll close off with this, and I'm stealing this from Mike Francesa, who said this a bunch of times, but he's right. The NFL is a league that's set up on parity. So it's literally designed so that every team could go 8-8. So for the Giants to have gone this many years of being bad, it's almost impossible to do in the league. It's Cleveland Browns level, but that's where they are, and that's why as a Giants fan you have to just hope that they lose and hope that Dave Gettleman gets fired.
Yeah, I think I put it at 6 wins for them. I think they have potential for more if Daniel Jones elevates the team a little bit, but I don't think they've done enough to fill the holes that they have to make you feel kind of like, oh, this can be a team that could do a 49ers, go from 4 wins to the playoffs, let alone to the Super Bowl. But like, I think if everything breaks like average, it's a 6-win team. I think that Jones can get them to 8 if he's playing well, but they can also go down as low as 4 if he just regresses.
8 would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
I don't think he's like, this isn't even a knock on him. I don't think he's nearly good enough to raise this team to 8 wins. And I don't think there's a lot of quarterbacks that would. They don't have a pass rush. Like, do you know how good an offense has to be to keep up when the defense cannot get to the quarterback and you're facing a good offense? Like, they're playing the Ravens this year. That's going to be comical. They have no chance. There is 0%. You can rarely say that in an NFL game. They have no chance in that game. Like, the Ravens are going to score 7 straight touchdowns if they want to. Games like that, they have absolutely no chance. The Cowboys and Eagles have basically been a hopeless venture for the last 4 or 5 years. You can chalk up 4 losses right there. It's easily too. I mean, if they win one game against those two teams, it's shocking. Right? That's 5 losses right there. The Steelers, you can chalk up a lot of losses, which is funny. Me and Phil always talk about this. Giant fans before the year. I think it's finally starting to shift because the reality of their terrible nature has started to sink in. But even up to this year, Giant fans go through the schedule and say, Cardinals, that's a win. Lions, that's a win. Jets, that's a win. They lost all of those games. It's like they go through the schedule and chalk up these wins against teams that they're at best on par with, in reality worse than. So the real situation is you can go through the Giants' schedule, say Ravens, that's a loss. Cowboys twice, those are losses. Eagles twice, those are losses. They're not winning 8 games. If that happens, that means half the league sat up the year with coronavirus. That's the only way that's happening. And the Giants just got lucky because their players took social distancing seriously.
Mike, here's the best way I could put it. If I were a Cleveland Browns fan, I'd look at the schedule and say, Giants, that's a win.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of teams are looking at the schedule saying, oh, we can beat the Giants this year. I'm sure the Redskins probably look at their schedule saying, oh, we can beat the Giants this year.
They shouldn't say we can beat the Giants. They say we will beat the Giants unless our team, the whole team had to stay home because they had the stomach flu and they're playing the third stringers.
Right, and I think that's the point Justin's trying to make is that as a Giants fan, you find yourself looking at the schedule and you're like, oh, the Browns, we can beat them. The Redskins, we can beat them. The reality is that those teams there and their fans look at it the exact same way. Yeah, we're going to beat the Giants, and over the past few years, they've been right.
Yes, they have. And one last thing I want to throw out to you. I mentioned this to Dan Duggan earlier in the show. We are now a year out from the Odell Beckham trade. Considering what happened with him in Cleveland last year, has your opinion on the deal changed at all?
I'll go first. No, it was one of the worst trades in the history of professional sports. The Giants traded a superstar, all-world talent for a mediocre safety and a defensive tackle that's unheard of. That's like Babe Ruth to the Yankees bad. And it really doesn't matter how Odell plays in Cleveland. That's what people don't understand. Because if you wanted to trade the guy, you could have gotten a lot more for him. But Gettleman has already admitted that he didn't shop him. So it's kind of like, this happens in baseball all the time. I hate to keep going back to baseball. It's my favorite sport, so I know it a little bit better. But in baseball, a lot of times people evaluate trade deadline deals, and they're like, oh, the number one prospect we traded didn't turn out to be that good, so it didn't matter. But that's not true because the trade value is enormous. Beckham had enormous trade value when the Giants traded him, and they got a defensive tackle and a mediocre safety. That's just a pathetically bad trade.
Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% because it's twofold for me. For one, the big reason I still said is the value. You should have gotten a lot more for him. Granted, DeAndre Hopkins trade kind of threw that for a loop, but they shouldn't have traded him for starters. The locker room culture BS is just that. It's BS. Just he worked hard. Teammates loved him. He wants to win. What more do you want? Like, other than for him to not, he occasionally said some dumb things, but who cares? Move on. He's a great player. They should have been able to get a lot more for him. And if you make a bad decision, it's illogical, it's irrational, and it turns out well. And this decision didn't turn out well, by the way. Jabril Peppers is exactly what we thought he'd be, the mediocre strong safety. Dexter Lawrence is a run-stuffing nose tackle that doesn't matter. But let's just say the decision turned out well and they got lucky. It doesn't mean it was a good trade. It just means that a bad decision turned out well. But that's besides the point because it didn't. But I just want to add that because sometimes, like I use this analogy a lot. If you're playing blackjack and you have 20 and you hit, it's a horrible decision, and the dealer puts out an ace. You can't clap and say, I'm smart, I'm a genius, I'm going to do that again next time. No, you're an idiot and you got lucky. That's besides the point. The Beckham trade didn't turn out well. How he played in Cleveland, he didn't play great, but that's a bad Baker. Phil claims Baker Mayfield will be out of the league within the next year. I don't agree with that, but he did regress. That situation was a disaster. I still think Beckham in the right offense, Beckham anywhere will be amazing unless injuries take their toll, but it didn't turn out well. It's just this year was just not Beckham's best year. So, no, I don't reevaluate the trade. It was still extremely idiotic, and they shouldn't have done it.
And you know what, Mike? Also, I'm going to add a year for the Baker thing, so I'll make it 2 years. But you know what? what people don't talk about with the Giants also, and we haven't talked about it in the, I guess, half an hour or so that we've been going, their receivers are terrible now, too. By trading Beckham, they have a very bad receiving core. Sterling Shepard is okay. Slayton showed some potential, but they do not have a good receiving core. And I know that a lot of people got all high on the you don't need receivers, but that even ran out for Tom Brady and the Patriots this year. It caught up to them not having receivers. So trading Beckham was just bad on multiple fronts. It harmed the roster. It was they didn't capture the value for the player, and they set a bad example too. I think for whatever that's worth, for some of their star players to know that hey, we'll just trade you. I don't think superstar players really like the notion of people just trading them for reasons that are really, really just silly.
Yeah, and the thing about that, we got through the entire fan forum with barely mentioning Leonard Williams, so that's a win for him.
I brought him up in the very beginning, and I'll bring him up again. Leonard Williams, franchise tag, one of Gettleman's dumber decisions. But Justin is right; it could have been much worse. They could have given him a long-term deal. I'm sure that'll happen after this season.
They still might.
Well, the Leonard Williams. I mean, when you just try and think about the worst Gettleman decisions, I think you have to break it into two categories. It's what was the dumbest, like most illogical, and what was the most impactful. Because Leonard Williams trade is clearly Saquon is probably the most impactful, but at least you can kind of understand the logic of he's clearly a Hall of Fame caliber talent. So at least I get it. It's very dumb and it's idiotic and it makes me furious still to think about. But Leonard Williams, you cannot justify it. There's zero way to justify it. You traded a draft pick and 8 games left in a season that you have no chance of making the playoffs for a guy who's going to be a free agent. And he's not even that good. And the only justification you could come up with is it gave them the chance to negotiate with him early. And you get to see tape on him on your own team. You have to pick which reason is dumber, but that to me is the dumbest. That trade, I texted with my friends for days, Phil included, some of my other friends. Like, you cannot possibly justify that trade. It's not even possible. There are people on Twitter that do it because we just live in a world where contrarians exist, and someone has to disagree with the general consensus. But it's dumb. That to me, the Beckham trade again. The Beckham trade is more impactful. You traded away Hall of Fame caliber talent. But the Leonard Williams, that's what I'm saying with Gettleman. All right, what's his worst move? Are you talking about dumbest and most illogical or most impactful? So the Leonard Williams to me is that trade I actually think it's underrated by the Mets, like by the media, how dumb it was. I don't think it's talked about it. Every time Dave Gettleman's name comes up, I should say, by the way, this is the guy that traded for 8 games of a solid defensive tackle in a lost season.
The day they got him, we're in a group text with my brother, and my brother texted that they got him, and I actually didn't believe it because I just assumed that John Mara and Dave Gettleman, that there was like some semblance of intelligence, but I was wrong. And yeah, I don't know what to say about it. We wanted to watch the tape because that's really, really hard to justify in 2000. I mean, if I can watch Leonard Williams tape right now. All I have to do is go to youtube.com and I can watch it. So I don't really understand, but I don't want to get too riled up with Dave Gettleman. I guess the whole world has made me realize that there are things more important than Dave Gettleman. So I'm trying to stay calm, but yeah, I sorry to the listeners if we have a very negative outlook. If there's some positive Giant fans, keep it to yourself because you're wrong. And
I'm not sorry. It's not negative. It's realistic. There's a difference. If you assess the situation, this was the Giants' problem with the whole Saquon offseason. They probably were looking at everybody else saying the Giant, Gettleman and Mara were sitting in their robes and drinking whatever old men that are losing their mental facilities drink, and saying, the media is so negative. Eli still has it. He's got years left, and everyone else is negative. Everybody else is realistic. This roster sucks. Eli is washed. We are being realistic. Anything else is stupid. Like any other view of the Giants' outlook, just like it has been for the last few years, if you don't realize this team sucks, you are a delusional. And I'm not sorry. I feel bad for you that you can't wake up and smell the coffee that's been brewing for the last 7 or 8 years. But we don't have anything to be sorry about. We're just spewing facts. The Giants suck. It's just doomsday all over again, and they'll never be good as long as the gentleman is employed.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. Thanks for having me again, Mike. This was fun. I'm love to do this again sometime. Hopefully, we can do baseball over-unders at some point this year, but I guess that's still TBD.
Yeah, as I said on the top of the podcast, I said, you know what, it's obviously I was talking about the top of the show about how baseball has this plan out there, but we don't know anything right now. It's for me, it's pointless to speculate when we have sports. We could have it in June. We may have it in September. We may not have it at all. So for me, it's just one day at a time, see what happens, and go from there, because it's fun to talk about, we're going to have the 100-game season with double headers, but realistically, we don't know anything. And that's just, it's the way it hope for us sports fans, but we really have to go one day at a time here, see what happens.
That's the right approach. Sports, not sports. That's all we can do right now. This is unprecedented. It's insane. But stay healthy, be safe. Thanks for having me as well. I enjoy it. It's therapeutic talking about how bad the Giants are and how much of an incompetent moron Dave Gettleman is. It makes me feel better, believe it or not.
Yeah. Same. There's a lot of people who will cut you off and say, you don't be so negative. There's that word again. But it's good to have somebody who lets me just vent. So thank you for that, Mike.
No problem. This is the fan.
Mike, you're a therapist. We're going to write you a check.
Hey, this is the fan forum. I let the fans say what they want to say. So you guys got your points out there. I also will say as a Jet fan, thank you for that 3rd round pick. It'll be very helpful for us this year.
Yeah, you're welcome. Don't blow it, but knowing the Jets, I'm sure they will. So.
Well, we'll see with Joe Douglas. I feel like Joe Douglas actually has a plan, unlike some of the other guys we've had.
That's true.
All right. Thanks, guys. Again, it was a lot of fun talking to you. Up next, we're going to the pop culture portion of the program. We're talking Westworld Season 3 with Sam DeRosa right after this. All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast. That you just heard the theme song, which I think is fantastic, from the HBO series Westworld. Season 3 is underway as we speak. We have 3 episodes in, And since Curb Your Enthusiasm is over, we're going to go to the next HBO show, and it's time to bring back into the podcast our pop culture correspondent, Sam DeRosa. Sam, welcome back. How are you?
Good, and thanks for having me.
Not a problem. I got to say, first time not doing this in person is a little weird.
It's actually very strange because I'm a very social few person. So I'm like, where's Mike?
Yeah, it's like I think there were only a couple who had done every appearance in person on there a lot. It was you and Joe D. Right now, I think it's down to Joe D. That's going to change in about like a month.
Well, I'm glad I'm like one of the surviving two.
Yeah, so you made the final two in that regard. But how's everything going with you in the quarantine world?
It's lonely, but it's good. You know, getting a routine down, doing, you know, like whatever the CDC's like, have a routine. So I have my own weird routine.
Yeah, I have a routine as well. It's usually write, prep for podcast, work, and then catch up on the things I'm 5 days behind on the DVR. That's basically my routine.
Mine's like clean the room in the morning, like whatever I made a mess for the day before, and then do my work for work, and then literally like play video games and watch TV, and then do a little more work. So it looks like I bookend, you know?
Yeah, spread the work out, make it last.
Yeah, so it looks like I've been doing work all day, but in reality, it's been like 4 hours of work.
Yeah, I hear that. And let's get to the point of why you're here today. We're talking Westworld Season 3. So for those who are not the uninitiated, you want to give let's say the 60-second like pitch on like what the show is.
Like the entire show? Like
just the general premise.
Okay. Is my 60 seconds starting now?
Go.
Okay. So there is a theme park, like a Six Flags or like compounds or whatever, full of like artificial intelligence, so like robots. And it's a story of I don't like to use the word robot, but we're gonna go with that. Robot Dolores, who you see her progression to self-awareness and the different issues that arise, and very complex characters, both artificial intelligence and real life. And it is a battle between humans and like artificial intelligence. And it's a great show to watch on HBO if you have a subscription.
Yeah, you did that in 42 seconds. Excellent summation.
Oh, I got worried. Time moves so fast when I'm explaining things because I'm actually a horrible explainer.
Yeah, I'll add some details to what Sam was talking about. Basically, this show is set in this theme park called Westworld, and the main point of the parks basically is that you have these characters that are built called robot hosts, they're called. Basically, it's like if you've been to Disney World, you see the animatronics, like much more sophisticated versions of those are running around the parks. As the series progresses, we learn the guy who created them gives them intelligence and wants them to grow beyond their actual like programming and become like more sentient. The robots rebel at the end of season 1, basically. Season 2 is a bit of a mess, but it ends with Dolores, who Sam mentioned, leaving the park and bringing some hosts with her, including Bernard, who is... The show begins, we think he's a human, but we find out later he's a host built by the founder of the park, Robert Ford. The third main character is another host named Maeve, who gains like superpowers throughout the series somehow. That's basically some of the stuff, but for more information on the currencies, I'm going to throw the spoiler warning up there, so... If you're not confused yet, you might want to get out and actually try and watch some of this thing, or at least go find another podcast to explain more of this. But Westworld, very, very complicated.
Very complicated. Also, you should throw on the spoiler alarm when you're like, Bernard is actually a host, because that was such a mind blow in season 1. It was one of my favorite. Actually, it's like my second favorite thing of season 1.
Yeah, so did you get in the show right from the beginning, or did you like pick it up like midway through?
Okay, so now like because I was telling you before we started how I've rewatched it a few times. So I'm pretty sure I started but I don't think I started season 1, episode 1. I think I started season 1, episode 3. I think I was 2 weeks behind. I'm like, this is a weird show. I don't know if I'm gonna watch. And then I heard the hype for it. But I've been with it since season 1. It wasn't the first episode, but definitely episode 2 or 3.
Yeah, I'm around the same point where I heard good things. I think episode 2 was coming out, and then I went back and watched the pilot. I'm like, ooh, this is cool. And I sort of stuck with it and just wrote it out. Season 2, season 2, like you and I think would both agree, was a little like out there. They played with time too much, and then they had a bunch of different threads going on. But like, there were some episodes in that season where you're like, wow, this show can hit it out of the park when it's on game.
Yes, I mean, speaking from somebody who literally just watched season 2 yesterday and today, better the second time around if you rewatch it.
Yeah, once you have an idea where it's going.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, that makes more sense. You know, everything with Bernard with the time loops with him still confuses the living bejesus out of me.
Yes, it did. And we're going to talk now about like season 3 so far. So I think season 3 personally, I think it's much better than 2 was. I feel like they've gotten it back on track. They focus more. They simplify the storylines down to, I think, 3 main ones from what we can see. They added a 4th in episode 3, but we have a storyline with Dolores, a storyline with Bernard, and a storyline with Maeve. I think that's helped the show a lot.
Yeah, because I think they're like the 3, like the power hitters kind of deal. So like they'll have the characters, like the minor characters behind them. First episode of season 3, I was like, oh no, what's going to happen to the show kind of deal, you know, because I'm a sucker for the actual like theme park itself, like Westworld. I like seeing the different worlds. And so like when they had episode 2 with the war world, and then I guess you should put up the spoiler alarm so it's okay to say, but when it was like all in Maeve's like, you know, her, not imagination, but like her like percepted reality, like that she figured that out. Like I was a little upset. I'm like, oh, we're not really in Westworld. But then like Bernard goes there and I'm like, what? I'm like, stop teasing me with the Westworld like being there.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. We'll start with the Dolores storyline first. I mean, we pick up the season where like she is out in the real world. She's trying to infiltrate this company called Insight. She's trying to find information how to get back at the humans. And I mean, what do you think her master plan is here? What do you feel like her main goal is? I'm
like, oh, I cannot for the life of me think of it spits out all this like ideas and stuff. Like that program, that giant computer that they've developed, that in the first episode she tries to seduce the man for.
The Insight.
Yeah, so, like, I think she just wants to corrupt it.
Yeah.
And she's gonna, like, so in episode 3 that we just saw, she tells Caleb that, like, this is all you're gonna amount to because this is what this computer told you you're going to be. So what I'm thinking is, like, she's gonna, like, set free not only the host, but also, like, mankind.
Yeah, because in this world, mankind, basically the elites run everything. It's the 1% of the 1% thing. You kind of see on Mr. Robot a little bit, which I love that show. We get a little bit of that here. I also think Dolores' storyline is interesting because, like, she is, like, the most bloodthirsty of any of these hosts. And, like, we see her episode 1 basically just, like, rip apart an entire military unit of mercenaries out to, like, basically, like, kill her, which I think was pretty impressive.
And it's really cool because I think it was season 1, episode 1, where the first ever episode, she kills the fly. So you go from killing a fly to killing all those people in, like, 2 seasons. It's, like, a pretty cool character arc for her.
Yeah, it is. And she's basically been paired so far this year with the new character, Caleb, played by Breaking Bad alum Aaron Paul. So how do you think he's fitting into this show?
Because I watched, because episode 3, I apologize. Episode 3 came out, and I think it was in this episode where I was, okay, like, Caleb is part of this. Because at first I'm like, I understand they have to set up Caleb's character. We don't know much about him. But I was very wary about him. But now I'm like, okay, like, you deserve a chance, and I will give it to you.
Yeah, I feel like in terms of the human characters, the most pure human character on this show is since Elsie.
That's true, yeah. So I feel so bad for Elsie. I wish she survived.
Yeah, poor Shannon Where got such the raw end of the stick on this show. She was like a breakout character in season 1. Then she disappears like halfway through the season. Like, we don't see her again until about the end of season 2, where it finds out that Bernard basically like knocks her out and like leaves her like trapped in like a cabin or something. And a different part of the park. Then she comes back, Leslie Odom gets killed off by the Charlotte robot.
Yeah, I was like hella pissed. Also, I thought she was a host for a little bit. I was like, no, she's not real. Because I'm like, how do you survive for that long?
Yeah, well, I mean, the show does a good job of like blurring the line of actually questioning, like, are you a human or is this a robot? Like, it's programmed to think it's human, like we talked about before.
Yeah, like Luke Hemsworth's character.
Yeah.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, that one was a surprise. I know they dropped it at the end of season 2. They basically they made it subliminal, like, oh, like he was actually built as a robot, and the whole time we thought he was actually just a human. And then we basically
the only time I thought he was a host was when he's like, I've been here so long, I can't remember like how long I've been here. I was like, oh, maybe, and then I was like, forgot about it because that was the last episode of season 2. And then he was a host, and like, holy snap, like that's insane.
Yeah, they do a good job with like making you question stuff. Like there's especially in episode 2, the Maeve episode, where we see the great Lee Sizemore, played by Simon Quarterman, come back, and then you have this whole bit where like at the end of season 2 you thought he died because he gets basically riddled up with bullets like most of the way through, like as he's helping the host try and get to this frontier park, basically where the conscience can be free. He comes back, and then we find out that he is actually a host designed in this fantasy world they made to occupy Maeve's mind, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I know. I was really upset because I really enjoyed his character. I hope he's like secretly alive.
I would not be surprised if a Sizemore host actually showing up in the park at some point, because I feel like we're not done with the park yet.
Okay, so I don't know. I know I'm kind of like sidetracking, but I was rewatching the entire series because I'm crazy. But there's an episode, I think it's in season 1, where like they're showing Logan all the different hosts. There's a host that looks just like him, and it's really bugging me. And I'm like, I'm not too sure if I'm like on something or all like people are starting to look similar. But I'm like, wait a second, that looks like him.
That wouldn't surprise me if they had stuff like this going on, because Ford remember the original founder of the park, Robert Ford, played by the great Anthony Hopkins, by the way. I love the fact they actually got him on a TV show, but he made a young version of himself. So, I mean, anything's possible with this show.
That is true.
Yeah, I remember that as well. I think the thing about Caleb I like is that, like, he is a complex character. Like, you see him in the pilot of season 3, where he's going out basically using the crime app to go, like, basically rob people to get money and you find out it's just to help out his sick mother, and you're like, oh, yeah. I understand it. And that gave us our great cameo from the one and only Marshawn Lynch, which I love as a sports fan.
It was so funny because I'm like, that looks like Marshawn Lynch, and I'm like, no, I'm just losing my mind. And then I was watching like the after scenes, and it was like Marshawn Lynch. I'm like, holy mackerel, like there he is. I wasn't crazy.
Yeah, I love they gave him the light up sweatshirt that basically lights up whatever his mood is. That was fantastic.
Yes, he actually talked about that sweatshirt too. If you watch the after scenes, like behind the scenes stuff, he's so funny.
Yeah, I love that. I think his character's name is actually called Giggles. I think it's hysterical considering his personality.
Oh yeah. Wasn't he in a role on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like a guest role?
Yeah, for somebody who did not like the media when he was playing, there's actually some interesting real life stuff going on with him.
Yeah, if you look it up, if you it's not going to ruin anything watching it. If you look up his episode that he was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine to watch it, he's so funny.
I'll add to the Quarren Stream checklist here. There's enough stuff going on in the streaming queue. We'll get to yours later, but I'll stick to the Westworld. I think Aaron Paul, I think his character works. I like that he has this sort of like, he's going along because he doesn't realize he's a host initially, was like, it's the right thing to do. She needs help. Like, he's like a pure character. He's not something we see from the rest of these humans who are all just greedy pigs, basically.
Yeah, and I like that. I think on some level, Dolores like respects that, and she's not like completely like self-centered. Like, she's self-centered, but not like insanely. Like, she's there to like. I know she has motives to do what she wants, but I think that she also like wants to help on some level.
Yeah, I feel like in some level, like Caleb is filling the role that Teddy had the first 2 seasons for her, where like he was like the good guy love interest. She ends up like killing Teddy, I think, in season 2 because like he couldn't do what the Wyatt side of personality wanted. And for people who are wondering what that is, Ford programmed her with a separate personality, like based on like a renegade called Wyatt, who is basically the rebellious side of Dolores. I think like Caleb fills that Teddy spot.
Yeah, but no one can replace James Marsden. He holds a special part in my heart. But I think she shipped him off to like where the coordinates are, to all the information.
Yeah.
And I think that's where he is right now.
Yeah, in that, I think she alluded to him possibly being in the Forge with the Ghost Nation people, with Maeve's daughter, with like all those other hosts who they sent there to basically free their minds from having to be like in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking
of... he's also there, so like he's also there by himself though.
Yeah.
At the end, he's all alone, which I would think there would be other like hosts there. So I'm just thinking that like it's a separate place. Like he's just with all the numbers. He's just with like information. He's all alone, but he's with information. Because I feel like she only trusts him to like guard the information.
Yeah, it might be a motive there, but now you brought him up, I do want to get to another interesting point, because this episode, we spent a lot of time with Charlotte Hale, played by Tessa Thompson, and we'll give a little backstory for those who are not familiar with the show entirely. Season 1, she shows up late as a board member on the company Delos, who runs the park. Season 2, we think we're following her trying to stop the rebellion, but we find out late in the year that Dolores made a host that looks like Charlotte, kills her, and then leaves the park in the Charlotte host body, brings along 5 brain balls. Later on, we see that, again, if you're not following this, we're doing the best we can. This is very complicated. Yeah, so continue the point here. Like, Dolores rebuilds her own body as a host. We see the Charlotte host being put back into Delos to sort of be a mole, but we don't know what host's like brain ball is inside of Charlotte. So who do you think that is right now? Who do you think is playing the role of Charlotte?
So while I was rewatching the entire series, I wrote down like a few people, and I honestly think it would be like an alpha model, like the original host, which is like, you know, Teddy and Dolores, but also I can't tell if it's like more of like a female or a male presence, because at some parts like Charlotte like sounds like a man, like when she like kills the man in the park, you know, she has like more of like a manly presence. And then like when she's like alone with Dolores, she's like crying and upset. So I'm like, who the heck is this person? So I really think it could be 3 people. And it's Clementine, Angela, or Mr. Abernathy. Which I feel like maybe he has a first name, but I don't know who it is.
I think it's Peter Abernathy.
Okay, I call him Mr. Abernathy because I don't know him on a first name basis.
Yeah.
So it has to be one of those. I have to be one of those 3 people. Angela, I feel like would be like a long shot, but I wouldn't be surprised. I would hope it was like Akita. He's like, I know I can't pronounce his name.
Yeah.
Ends up being my favorite character with Maeve on season 2. Like he would be like a super long shot, like insanely. But like I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those brain balls in her purse.
Yeah.
Because he's also an alpha. You know, he's an alpha model. Like he's been there. Like he has certain like little things that I feel like would help Dolores.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. A lot of possibilities there. I think Teddy's a strong possibility just because the way that they were interacting in the episode, like it made it feel like the way the dialogue, especially when she first brings the Charlotte host online, it made me feel like Teddy was there. But then I got thrown like in the scene when they're in the hotel. I'm like, this doesn't sound like something Teddy would say. So maybe it is somebody like Clementine who was an assistant character to Maeve in the original park, and then basically gets lobotomized in the middle of season 2, in the middle of season 1, and then you wonder.
And that like lovely scene in the last episode of season 2 where she like rides it. She's like the last member of the apocalypse, basically. You know, like she's riding on the white horse, like she's supposed to be Beth. So, like, I'm wondering, like, yeah, she is, like, kind of lobotomized, so I'm, like, curious if she's fixed. Like, that's the only thing I don't get about this show is, like, how you fix people. Like, it's so strange. So, I really think it might be Clementine. Like, Angela, I think, like, blew herself up or something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, is that her? But then again, like, they have that bulletproof brain little holder because they don't really have brains.
Yeah, they're all brain balls at this point. Like that's basically their entire code and personalities are these little like black balls that you can insert into a host. Like we saw that like the Maeve host had the brain ball removed and at the in the scene episode 2 when Bernard goes looking for her in cold storage. But like I think Teddy makes sense. I don't want to throw out as a dark horse. We haven't heard really anything about Armistice yet, so like I could see her being inside there too.
She's the one with all the snake tattoos, correct?
Yeah, she's the one with all the snake tattoos who was helping out Maeve and Hector for most of season 2.
I know. So, like, I thought that it was going to be her. So, you know, like, when host Charlotte carved, like, stuff into her arm and into her chest?
Yes.
That's when I thought it was her. But then I'm like, they barely had any interactions with each other. And she's not even one of the original hosts, where, like, Dolores would have, like, spent time with her to remember who she is. So, like, that's where I'm, like, especially when she, like, did, like, you know, carved into her own host body, I was like, oh, that could be her. But, you know what? Who knows in this show?
Yeah, it could be somebody we completely out of left field we've seen once, and then it just happened to be Charlotte. So you never know with this show.
Yeah, it could be, what's his face? Hector, right?
Yeah.
Like, Maeve's love interest. It could even be him. That's even more of a long shot.
It could be, because we only saw Hector in the dream sequence, in Maeve's fantasy sequence there. We never saw his actual host body in the parks again.
Yeah, that's true. I just love. I just know that because Felix is one of my favorite characters, just because he's like super like loving. You know, he's another one of those good humans.
Yeah.
So I'm like curious before he went.
Yeah, Felix and Sylvester, I believe, are still working at the park, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Well, I hope they're okay. I really root for just Felix. I don't care about the other guys.
Yeah, Sylvester's a little bit of a douche.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Like, he's also only did things out of fear. He didn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm hoping he cared at the end when they're like, pick the host you want to, like, save or whatever. So, who knows?
Yeah, I think he's one for sure to keep an eye on. And I think, let's go to Maeve. Before we move on from Charlotte, I want to say, this show does a good job of making you care about characters you really didn't care about. You mentioned before with Akishita from last season, where his episode where they gave you his backstory was like the best of the season. I think what
that was the best of the season. Oh my god! And like when I was like rewatching it, because of course I'm doing like actual work when I'm rewatching Westworld season 1 and 2. But for his episode, I stopped everything I was doing because it was such a good episode.
Yeah, his was great. They gave you a lot of good backstory on Charlotte. Apparently, in the real world, like she has a kid and like she had like a significant relationship, and like they gave you like make you care more about like the actual Charlotte as opposed to like in the past, you're sort of like this soulless corporate type in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah. Did you like how the kid was like, "You're not my mom"? Like he knew.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like he could sense that something was off.
Because at first he's like, "You're not my mom," because his parents got divorced. Like she was like his mom. But like that was when you're like, oh, he doesn't. He's just saying that because they're like divorced. But it wasn't until she's holding him in bed and he's like, "I want my real mom back."
Yeah, it's interesting he picked up
like,
on it.
That was so weird. And then, like, when she's killing the man who is the pedophile in the park, she was like, he just, like, you know, because she knew that he knew that, like, you can't fool everybody.
Yeah, she can't fool everybody. Let's go to next character. I'll go to Maeve for a little bit. The Maeve storyline. We got most of that in episode 2, where we see her wake up in the park. She thinks she's in this war world, which is based on fascist Italy, I think, in the middle of World War II. We see her work with Sizemore, who we think at the time is alive, to escape. Then we learn the whole bit that this is just an illusion to occupy her android mind, which I love the part of that episode where they basically close the letterbox in when she realizes it. So, like, we basically change the format ratio, make you realize that it's not what it seems. So I think it's a trick I've seen them do on the show Homecoming on Amazon Prime. That's really cool.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that show. But I was just like, I was just so disappointed that you weren't actually in Westworld. That I was just like annoyed, but the concept is super insane. So like you're in Westworld, in this fake Westworld, but then you also have like where the humans fix you. You know what I mean? Like It's so complex. It's like so insane. It's like a world within a world within a world. So I'm just like, Jesus. But I can't figure out where that like artificial intelligence like reality world is.
Yeah, I think it's like in that unit, like where basically May's brain ball's in like a separate facility with a couple other ones, and at the end of this, she realizes what's going on. She manages to trick the simulation by basically, because she has a great line about how one thing I learned about humans is that you're all lazy, and she basically comes with like a riddle to stump the code, and then she basically hijacks a robot to break her brain ball out, but.
Yeah, that was so cool. I like how she's like, she'll do. And I'm like, oh no, that poor robot.
Yep. Yeah, and then at the end, we see her back in her actual host body. She basically is trying to be, I think, another one of the new bad guy of the season, basically using her as a pawn to try and take down Dolores. So I think it's interesting to see how she tries to overcome that, because this guy can actually...
I think she's in another reality, because I don't think that guy's an actual person. I think that guy might be the whole system. I'm not too sure, because we haven't seen him in person except with Maeve, like with with Charlotte. She has to wear holographic glasses. I'm not too sure about what kind of technology they use. But I'm thinking, like, is this guy even real? Like, I might be just paranoid, but
this show, you never know. You can never rule anything out.
That's true.
Yeah. Let's go also to Bernard, and Bernard's storyline. We saw at the end of season 2, Dolores brings him back online, basically says, I need you to be a check on me in case I go too far. And right now it seems like his mission basically is like, I'm going to stop Dolores from basically like destroying all of mankind. And the one thing I will say that they put in the show, which I'd be concerned about if I was a Bernard fan, I don't like the fact that he has a remote control that controls, like, basically switches him from human to full-on unaware robot. That seems like a bad idea to have that just floating around your pocket.
Yeah. Just hanging out there, like reaching in for change, flips the switch. Like, I'm just so like, I only really honestly liked Bernard season 1, because you think he's human until he's not, and then I'm like, oh, he's a host. But then like season 2, it kind of lost me on my Bernard fan train. Just because I like want him to be Arthur, you know, like I want him to have that self-awareness of Arthur, but he never will because he's built by Ford. But I'm just like, I don't know if he can stop Dolores. I feel like he'll be like, hey, like this is fine, but maybe not kill like 100% of the human population, just kill 99. I feel like he can't even really stop her.
Yeah, I think his mission's gonna be fun. Now he's got Stubbs on his side again too. That will also be interesting to see them sort of buddy cop it through the rest of the season.
Yeah.
I also loved how Stubbs also like basically realized like my function is to protect all hosts. The hosts are basically dead, so I'm gonna try and off myself. And Bernard basically reprogrammed says, your mission now is to protect Bernard at all costs. He's like, you could have just asked.
Yeah, that was clever. That was cute. Also, I like how everyone was like, what's the deal with Hemsworth on the show? Like, what's his purpose? Because they've been saying that for 2 seasons. And now he had the purpose. I'm like, thank goodness.
Yes, the forgotten third Hemsworth brother, Luke Hemsworth. Everybody talks about Liam and Chris, and nobody talks about Luke.
Oh, poor Luke. Isn't he like the oldest or something?
I think that's correct. I feel like he is the oldest.
It's such an oldest thing people to forget about is the oldest child.
Yeah, we both relate to this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Last thing before we move on from the Westworld, because there's a couple other things I want to hit on with you in terms of the pop culture sphere. Like, who are some characters we haven't seen yet? You're surprised that we haven't heard from
in season 3.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's not really like that big a surprise. Like, I was surprised we didn't hear from Will already.
Yeah.
Because but you know, then I saw like the teaser for next week, and it's like probably all Will oriented.
Yeah.
So like Will or oh goodness, or Felix. I want to know what the heck's going on with Felix.
Yeah.
He's probably like my main concern right now.
Yeah, my main thing was like, where's Ed Harris? Because he's been in the main credits. He hasn't appeared in an episode yet. Like, he's been the biggest name star on this show for the first 3 seasons, and the fact we haven't touched on his storyline yet, the season's almost halfway there, is a little strange.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I can't remember. I don't know. I love Will, the beginning of the series, Will, and then I'm just he's just so he's a great character because he's very torn about his thoughts and stuff. But the part where he's just so obsessed with the world now that there is really no Westworld right now. I'm what the heck is his deal gonna be? Or are we just gonna see Host Will's brain moving? If we're just gonna get Host Will and he's actually dead.
Yes, another interesting
These are things I need to know next week.
Yeah, Keith even forgot that post-credit scene at the end of season 2, where we find out some point in the distant future he has basically become a host, and they're trying to program him so he's actually more of his full personality. I don't think we're there yet, but I'm curious when we get that addressed.
Yeah, although it's very fitting because of all the crap he put Delos through, his father. It's just so crazy.
It is. We'll check back in on Westworld in the future. Sam's agreed to come back on after the season. Hopefully by then we'll have more answers and probably a lot more questions about what's going on.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm very Westworld oriented.
Yeah. Let's talk about the other big pop culture phenomenon right now, which is Tiger King on Netflix. This documentary has taken over the world, and I got to say, you've seen all 7 episodes. I've seen 1. I have one question for you about this.
Okay.
Why is this popular?
I don't know, but the fact, and I know you told me you only watched 1 episode, so I won't go into huge depth. I know you probably seen spoilers, but I'm gonna respect the 1 episode watch. The fact that I got hooked after the documentarist or whatever, the guy who made the documentary was oh, so I didn't plan on this documentary being filmed for 5 years. I'm this is exciting. This is why, how you and I have to make the documentary for school and everything. So I'm imagine if you and I picked a topic, we were filming, and then something completely railed our entire documentary, and then we spent the next 5 years filming it. I was this has to be good. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's just because it's a dumpster fire, and because we're all in quarantine, this dumpster fire is needed to keep our minds at bay.
Yeah, part of me wonders, if we were not all locked in our house right now, would this thing be successful as it is?
I'm not too sure, because I think eventually it would. It'd be a longer curve, but our COVID curve, if there was no quarantine, it'd be the flattening of the curve. You know what I'm saying? Can you picture that in your head?
Yes, I can picture.
But since we're in quarantine, we're that big parabola that's insane. All the people watch it at once kind of deal, because we have all the free time. But I do think it would have picked up a lot of numbers eventually, not all at once, but.
Yeah, because all I hear about on Twitter is Joe Exotic. I got to say, the 1 episode I've seen, this guy is something else.
And then he just gets more. It just gets more insane. You think it can't get more insane, but then again, also if you have any idea about Florida, that's basically the, this underline, anything from Florida is basically crazy anyway. It's a lawless state in certain ways, so I feel that's just the documentary for you. But I thought it was well perceived. Some of the stuff in there, I'm interesting. There's some undercover filming kind of deal that I was just a little my little red flag went up. I'm eh. But then you'll see the speedboat, or not the speedboat. Since I'm not from Florida, I don't know these terms. It's the jet ski scene. You'll thoroughly enjoy, Mike.
I cannot wait. I'm gonna keep watching this because I have to see how this train wreck ends, because this is just such a dumpster fire.
Just keep in mind the only protagonist in this entire documentary are tigers and all the poor animals. Just so you know, I hope people know that owning animals like that in bulk is not a great thing to be proud of and everything.
Yeah, I was not a big...
And also, everything can be blamed on Carol Baskin. That's all you'll learn from this, I promise.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely find out what's going on. What else is on the Sam streaming queue right now?
Ooh, I cannot think of words today. Definitely, I'm finishing up Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Really enjoy that show. I stopped watching it after season 5, and I'm like, oh, I don't know why I stopped at all. But I definitely, once it's over, The Plot Against America is on my watch list. What else? You did mention to me that Whose Line Is It Anyway is new, so that's going to be on my watch list. Oh, Golden Girls, that's another big one too. So this is for now. This is for April 1st. This is on my quarantine bucket list.
Yeah, April 1st quarantine bucket list. I've thrown you a few other suggestions off air, so like I'm going to say some of these. I'm going to be doing I'm giving my playlist out with the great Alan Pines down the line, but next week we'll talk on another item here. John Stanko's coming back on next week. We're going to be talking about McMillions next week.
Oh yes, that's what also is on my list that you mentioned to me the other day. I was like, that sounds so interesting.
Yeah, all hail HBO, as John likes to say. I'm excited to talk to him next week about all that. And I hear he's watching Westworld too, so hopefully he'll have an update on. We can talk about episode 4 with him next week.
Yeah, I'm very interested on his take on Westworld this season.
Yeah, because from what I've seen, he's all in. I've seen him on Twitter. He's basically like, this season's great. We're back on track. I'm watching regularly now.
Oh, good. I didn't see that tweet, so I was like, does he even like it? Because we have some varying opinions about things, so I always like to make sure that I'm on Stanko's good side.
Yeah, you don't want him ripping you on Twitter. It's not fun.
No.
All right, there you have it. Sam DeRosa doing some pop culture heavy lifting. Thanks again, Sam. Before I let you go, how do people follow you on Twitter? Keep up with some of the stuff you're up to.
Yeah, let's just see if I get it right this time. It's at SDEROS5 on Twitter. And from there, you can find me on basically anything. Just Google Sam DeRosa.
All right, there you have it. Thanks again, Sam.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and there you have it. That was this week's podcast. I want to thank all our guests this week. First up, Dan Duggan for calling in from talking about the New York Football Giants. I also want to thank Phil Fraietta and Justin Diaz, who were on the fan forum, and they also had some interesting stuff to say. I also want to thank Sam DeRosa, our pop culture correspondent, for calling in, talking a little Westworld, a little Tiger King, some other good stuff. If you want more good stuff like this podcast, including my look at how the Noah Syndergaard injury will impact the Mets if we have a baseball season, check out the blog over at justendthesuffering.wordpress.com. You'll subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify. Search for Just End the Suffering there. Find the podcast on any of those platforms, and you can go back and listen to all our episodes on there. I mean, if you're running out of stuff to watch on TV, I got about 104 episodes of back content there for you. Check it out. You can also search on YouTube, Mike Phillips' YouTube channel. You can check out I'm putting up individual segments of the podcast. The full episodes are going up on YouTube as well. Feel free to leave your feedback and star ratings. It's also important for the show. Help me make it even better going forward. You can also follow me on Twitter at mphillips331. That's MPHILIPS331. And tweet me at the hashtag #WhoIsCharlotte. We had a fun discussion with Sam about that. Trying to figure out which host is inside the Charlotte host right now. So hashtag #WhoIsCharlotte. Next week, we're going to have another sports show. Still trying to decide what direction I want to take that on. I got some ideas there, working on some guests, working on some interesting stuff there. But as I mentioned earlier, John Stanko will be here next week. We're going to have some fun with him. But until then, hope you have a better week than Olympic fans.
This has been the Just End the Suffering podcast.
I'm out.